The air in Studio 6B that night was charged, thick with the kind of celebrity energy only a breakout star can generate. Jacob Elordi walked onto the stage, and the audience, mostly young, completely obsessed, exploded. The lights pulsed neon blue, reflecting the modern intensity of his fame. Jimmy Fallon, in his usual affable state, was ready for the standard chat. The meteoric rise, the blockbuster roles, the current project. Specifically, the latest, darkest project, the highly anticipated Netflix adaptation of Frankenstein. Jacob was relaxed, witty, and perfectly navigating the demands of the late-night circuit. But tonight was not going to be standard. It felt playful, predictable, fun, until the rhythm broke, abruptly, deeply. Jimmy, known for orchestrating the perfect on-air surprise, slowly, deliberately set his cue cards down on the desk. This gesture, minute to the casual viewer, was a seismic shift for the audience. The easy banter ceased. Jimmy's expression grew serious, his eyes locking onto Jacob's with an unusual intensity. He didn't just change the topic. He opened a door to a vault Jacob had worked for years to keep sealed. "Jacob," Jimmy began, his voice dropping to a near whisper that carried immense gravity across the vast studio. "Tonight, I want to show you something deeply personal, something you have never seen, something the world has never seen." Jacob's confident posture shifted. A flicker of genuine confusion, then mild panic crossed his face. He nodded slowly, perhaps suspecting an embarrassing teenage photo, but entirely unprepared for the reality. This was not a joke. This was an intervention. If this raw, unscripted moment of courage resonates with you, please subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. We share these unforgettable moments of vulnerability and human connection because they matter. The vast stage lights dimmed instantly, plunging the studio into an unsettling near darkness that amplified the silence. The massive screen behind them flickered to life. What appeared was not a movie trailer, not a clip from the finished film, but a raw, shaky, black and white, unauthorized piece of behind-the-scenes footage. The intimacy and lack of professional polish immediately signaled that this was real, unedited, and intensely private. Jacob Elordi, the cool, composed star, was about to face a monster he thought he had buried deep inside his past. This single silent clip would shatter the public facade of Hollywood's newest leading man and reveal a stunning truth about the nature of pain, inheritance, and the burden of appearance. The makeup chair was not a place of transformation into a creature of fiction, but a place of confrontation with a creature of memory. The footage centered entirely on Jacob, months earlier, on the set of Frankenstein. He was sitting alone in the harsh, unflattering light of the makeup chair. He was only half transformed. Layers of meticulous, horrifying prosthetics covered one side of his face, creating deep, unnatural shadows and exaggerated features that warped his familiar symmetry. He looked less like an actor in costume and more like a creature emerging from a nightmare. He stared intently, unblinkingly, into his reflection. The raw visual shock of the image, Jacob Elordi, the matinee idol, twisted into a grotesque form, was palpable, stunning the Studio 6B audience into absolute silence. Jacob's composure on the Tonight Show stage completely dissolved. His eyes widened, his head tilting slightly as he processed the image. His lips barely moved as he whispered completely off the cuff, "Wait, where did you get this? How is this here?" Jimmy offered no response. He simply let the deeply uncomfortable silence and the grainy video fill the space. The act of holding back the explanation amplified the tension in Studio 6B to an almost unbearable degree. The entire audience, captivated by the unfolding drama, leaned forward, sensing a deeply personal revelation was imminent. In the footage, past Jacob continued to stare at the mirror, his chest visibly rising and falling with uneven, panicked breaths. This was not the smooth, controlled breathing of an actor preparing for a scene. It was the desperate, shallow breathing of someone having a visceral, emotional collapse. It was a raw, unedited glimpse into a moment of pure, unguarded terror. The camera focused relentlessly on his eyes, which were wide, dark, and filled with a distress that transcended acting. The monster prosthetics, intended to dehumanize, had somehow made him more tragically human, forcing him to see something he desperately wished to ignore. Then came the line that brought the entire momentum of the production to a halt and would ultimately stop the Tonight Show audience dead in their tracks. Past Jacob spoke the words into the mirror, his voice thick with a sudden, profound realization no one on set had anticipated. His utterance wasn't directed at the makeup artist or the director. It was a self-interrogation born from deep trauma. Why? Why do I look like him? The question hung heavy, thick with dread. A crew member, clearly unaware of the emotional minefield they were entering, asked gently from off-camera, "Like who, Jacob?" Jacob's voice, already trembling, became nearly inaudible, cracked by suppressed pain. He named the shadow he had always run from. "My father." The name hung in the air of the silent Studio 6B, heavy and devastating. The simplicity of the answer was its true power. Jimmy's trademark, easy smile vanished entirely, replaced by an expression of shock and deep empathy. On stage, Jacob's eyes instantly filled with tears. His hands went up slightly, a defensive posture against the exposure. It was instantly clear. He had no idea this intensely private, agonizing moment had been recorded, let alone broadcast to millions. The sheer vulnerability of the revelation was overwhelming. In the footage, past Jacob fought visibly not to break down. His chest heaved sharply as he pushed away from the mirror, his hands clutching the arms of the chair, fighting desperately for composure and breath. He was having a panic attack, triggered not by the horror of the monster, but by the horrific, accidental resemblance to the man who represented his deepest pain and trauma. Another crew member, sensing the genuine crisis, cautiously entered the frame and gently placed a stabilizing hand on his shoulder, a silent promise of support. "You're okay, Jacob. We've got you," the person murmured, a simple phrase that felt like a lifeline in the silent hell of the makeup chair. This small, unscripted act of kindness was a counterpoint to the darkness Jacob was experiencing. Jacob, on the Tonight Show stage, was swallowing hard, his gaze glued to the screen, reliving every second of the exposure. His body language was a masterclass in silent vulnerability, demonstrating the profound shock of having his past, his monster, yanked into the brilliant, blinding light of public scrutiny. He finally looked away from the blank screen and directly at Jimmy, his eyes red but now steady. He spoke quietly, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had just survived a major internal battle. "I didn't know anyone saw that," he finally whispered, the words barely making it past his lips. His voice was ragged, laced with the lingering fear of the moment. I was having a panic attack, seeing myself as the monster. It made me see someone I've tried to forget. I saw his shadow in the makeup." He elaborated on the sudden, terrifying realization that the grotesque features of the creature had, for a split second, merged with the painful memory of his father's face. The psychological weight of that moment was immense, translating through the screen to the captivated audience. Jimmy leaned forward, his voice losing all its entertainment polish, becoming unusually soft, tender, and deeply empathetic. He chose his words with the surgical precision of someone who understood the weight of the moment. "Jacob," he said gently, "you weren't seeing a monster in that chair." His voice caught slightly. "You were seeing pain. You were seeing trauma. The monster was the image of the past, not the makeup of the present. And tonight, you didn't run. You faced it. You faced the shadow you've been running from your entire life, right here, in front of everyone." Jimmy affirmed the bravery in Jacob's decision to stay and endure the filming, rather than walk away from the deeply triggering experience. The entire studio, previously charged with celebrity energy, fell into a kind of sacred silence, the kind of silence that is not empty, but heavy, echoing with unspoken understanding and shared empathy. The thousands of people present and the millions watching felt the profound weight of his admission. It was a silence filled with respect for a man who had been stripped bare of his defenses and was choosing in that moment to stand tall and claim his truth. Jacob slowly reached up, and wiped discreetly beneath his eye with a shaky hand, an instinctive movement to clear the fresh tears. He finally looked away from the blank screen and directly at Jimmy, his eyes red but now steady. He spoke quietly, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had just survived a major internal battle. The Frankenstein role wasn't difficult because of the long hours or the uncomfortable makeup, he confessed, the full truth finally out. It was difficult because it forced me, every single day, to look at a version of myself I've been avoiding for years. It forced me to look at the pain I inherited. I had to sit there and absorb that resemblance for hours, until the final image was nothing but a reflection of my own deeply buried fears. Jimmy, visibly moved, did what he rarely does in front of the camera. He stayed completely still. He bit his lower lip hard, struggling intensely to maintain his composure and not cry along with his guest. The raw vulnerability was overwhelming. The audience, moved far beyond mere celebrity worship, rose spontaneously to their feet, not cheering, not screaming, but standing in a profound, deep stillness and silent respect. It was an acknowledgement of his immense courage in choosing truth over image. The collective applause was soft, reverent, and deeply felt. That single clip, cut from the show and uploaded immediately, would later go unimaginably viral. It became the defining moment of Jacob Elordi's career, redefining him not as the handsome lead but as a genuine, vulnerable artist. It wasn't the viral dance or the funny anecdote that captured the world. It was the 2 minutes of raw honesty. The headlines were simple, yet devastating. Jacob Elordi confronts both the monster on screen and the shadow inside himself. The segment proved that sometimes, the bravest thing a celebrity can do is stop acting and simply tell the truth about the person they truly are. Jacob left the stage a different man. The burden of the past had finally been shared, diminished, and ultimately respected. His pain, once private, was now a public testament to the power of healing. The makeup meant to hide the man had instead revealed the soul. The experience was a form of catharsis, shared instantly with the world. Jimmy's final words on the segment, spoken after Jacob had left the stage to a wave of silent applause, summarized the emotional magnitude. That's what this show is about. Not the jokes, not the games. It's about moments where we realize we're all just trying to get through the day. And tonight, Jacob got through his by facing his monster. The clip resonated globally, a shared moment of collective empathy and understanding, proving that vulnerability is the ultimate form of strength. The lingering image of the half-monster, half-man staring into the mirror became a universal symbol of inherited trauma and the difficult, necessary journey toward self-acceptance. The show that night transcended entertainment. It became a public therapy session, witnessed by millions, changing how they saw both the star and themselves. The single simple truth, "Why do I look like him?" became the most quoted line of the night, resonating with anyone who has ever feared inheriting the darkness of their parents. Jacob Elordi's honesty gave them permission to face their own reflection. The power of that moment, the silence in Studio 6B, the trembling confession, the collective standing ovation, was monumental. It confirmed that the greatest performances are often the unscripted ones. It forced millions to re-examine their own inherited pain and the monsters they see in their own reflections. Jacob Elordi, by confronting his personal hell, inadvertently offered a mirror to the world. But what happens when the weight of a secret is carried not just for years, but for a lifetime? Next, we explore a story about gratitude that transcends even death. We witness the shocking moment Chris Evans, Captain America, fulfilled a dying boy's final heartbreaking request right on the Tonight Show stage, turning a superhero movie into a lifelong promise. The sheer depth of his commitment left Jimmy Fallon completely speechless and cemented his legacy as a true hero, on screen and off.